Welcome to episode 5 of NeuroWomen Natter. We keep talking about love and relationships and saying that we're going to grab a glass of wine and talk about that stuff. It might get emotional. But as February is Valentine's Day month, I thought, let's make it about love. And sure, we'll talk about the tricky relationships and the control freak arseholes and all that stuff as well. I haven't got a bottle of wine open, so I've got a can of fruity cider, which feels quite fitting. And Toni there has a gin and tonic. And quick audio description in case anyone is listening and can't see us. So as usual, we're a couple of quirky 40-something white women with highlighted hair, straight hair, and in our home offices. So I thought I'd start off by sharing a little bit about what love looked like to me when I was an undiagnosed neurodivergent kid at school, and then seeing if Toni or anyone watching live can relate to that or share anything similar. So what I thought was love, I've got to say now, it's more like a highly focused special interest, like you get when you're autistic, like a fierce crush, like you might choose a member of a band that you were going to fancy, like, oh, we all like Take That. I'm gonna pick Robbie. He's my crush, and somebody else will pick Gary or whatever. No one ever picked Gary, did they? But
I did.
Did you? Oh, wow, great. It's a good choice because he was the songwriter. But when I was at school, I went through this. I would pick a boy quite arbitrarily. I don't even know what I saw in them, but I would decide there's this one boy who I like. No, I don't like him. I'm infatuated with him. No, it's love. I love this boy and I'm going to follow him around. I'm going to be where he is. You'd call that stalking now. If I did it now, if a boy did it to me, I wouldn't like it. But that was just the twisted idea I had of how you get a boyfriend. And bearing in mind, I didn't know I was autistic. I went to a school that was ruled by these bitches. So I'm just holding up here an image of a girl with permed hair wearing a shell suit, and she has a head bag and she has Nike Air Max trainers. So my school didn't have uniforms. She was approved. It was okay to go out with girls who looked like that, right? I didn't look like that. I looked like this. So I had very unstyled hair, very inexpertly applied makeup, if any at all. I wore glasses. I'm wearing a handed down coat there. Sometimes I might be wearing something homemade or something off the market. I didn't have any money to go and buy the trendy clothes, so I wasn't good enough. And I was a bit weird, let's face it. I was into quite boyish things as well, like martial arts. So I wasn't your typical catch if you were a teenage boy at my school. So I'd just choose one and go after them relentlessly. And it actually helped me in some ways because I fancied a boy called Andy Whitehead, and that got me into playing guitar. So I'd do this thing where I'd fancy someone, so I decide that I want to be what I think they're looking for in a person. It can be so much so that you lose sight of who you even are, but that's what got me into playing guitar. My dad had been trying to get me into guitar for years and years, and I wasn't interested. Andy Whitehead did, and I've been playing ever since, and now I play bass as well, so thanks, Andy. And so that was crushes, right? But there's this term called limerence. I think I called it sibilance in a previous podcast. I got my terminology mixed up. But limerence is really putting somebody on a pedestal and worshipping them. And it's like unrequited love. And if you do actually manage to end up in a relationship with someone on that basis, then it's never a relationship of equals. It's always that person has all the power, and it's really destructive to you because your self-esteem kind of gets eroded. But that's what I did, and I did it at university, and I had this boyfriend at university, Golden Graham. I'll come on to him, but can I hear a bit about your early experiences with love, or what you thought was love at that age, Toni?
So, very much the same, Charlie, if I'm honest. It was either one or the other. I either become really, really obsessed, or I would like someone and get the ick very quick. So I was either all or nothing. And what springs to mind for me is I never really I never really went out with anyone from school because the boys in school used to annoy me. I used to always go out with somebody older or from a
Yeah.
different school. But
Oh,
there was
me
one,
too. Yeah.
yeah. But there was this one particular boy at school, and I think how it started is that he used to run past me and push me all the time. And then somebody said to me, "Do you remember that old saying that if they're bullying you or they're pushing you, that means they fancy you?" And I
Oh,
took that as a sign to say, well, he obviously likes me because he's picking on me.
mm,
Um, and because my nan used to say that all the time, well, it's a sign of affection. That means they're trying to get your attention. And obviously, the same as you, Charlie, not knowing that I was neurodivergent at that age, um, I took that as a sign to say, well, this boy really likes me. And I went after him. And do you know what? It caused me so much heartache and pain because he then played along with it just to show me up in front of lots of other people. So it's a
mm.
bit like that Carrie White. Do you know the Carrie White situation? Let's get her saying that she's got a date and then she explodes and she lets off all the pig's blood, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it was a bit like that. It's a bit like lured me in, gave me a false perception that he really liked me. I become absolutely obsessed with him to the point where then he pointed it out in the playground and really just called me in the middle of the playground and just made me feel about this big.
Oh,
And I just remember saying to my mum, crying my eyes out,
you
saying, I
want to
don't
hit
want to go back to
him?
school. Yeah, it wasn't I wanting to hit him. I was
So
so
mean.
ashamed and I
Yeah.
just didn't want to go back to school. And it always stuck with me. So then I remember saying to my nan, you're wrong. They don't like me. These boys don't like me. They're being horrible to me. But then again, it was that obsession with somebody where I would go completely all in, follow them, make sure that I was ringing them. There was one guy that I was on the phone to him. It was my first ever phone. And then contracts back then, your dad used to get you a phone and it was free calls after certain hours. So after 5 o'clock, it was free until the morning. And I remember being on the phone with
That's
him.
showing you're a bit younger than me because I never
Yeah.
had a mobile phone until I was like a proper grown up.
Yeah, so I must have been about 17. So I was 17. And I remember being on the phone to him from 8 o'clock at night to 4 o'clock in the morning. And I just become utterly obsessed with him. But then he changed quite quickly and was into other girls. But I allowed him to use me. I
Yeah.
allowed him for me to be there when he needed me to be there, when he didn't have somebody else to go out with, or when he was just bored or no one was interested in him, so he'd come back to me. And I allowed that to go on for about a year in my younger years. And I was like, why did even one point he proposed to me and then the next day completely ghosted me. So for anyone who doesn't know what ghosting
Oh,
means in nowadays term, means completely ignoring you like you
yeah.
don't exist.
Push-pull
Um,
relationships like that is so damaging.
yeah, yeah, it really is. But the thing is, I think when I look back on it now, I had the opportunity with another guy that I really liked, but because I couldn't get over this other guy that was always hanging me on, I couldn't get into a relationship with this other person because I
Yeah.
wasn't committed because I always had him in the back of my head. And I think actually it probably stopped me from being with people that
Mm.
actually liked me because I was so besotted with him, even though I knew deep down that
Yeah.
it wasn't right.
I had similar. I was a bit older. The boyfriend I had when I was 17 was lovely, though. I'd gone through, I can't really talk about this in a live stream. I think it's one for the book. But I went through quite a few difficult early sort of sexual encounters and stuff. And particularly when I discovered I was bisexual. But then at the age of 17, I went on a blind date. My friend Emma had a boyfriend, Kevin, who was a few years older. I think he was about 25. And they set me up to meet Kevin's best mate, Andy. And we really connected. In hindsight, I think he has a similarly wired brain to me. But at the time, all I thought is he likes the same kind of music as me. He plays bass. He taught me a few things on the guitar. He really was attracted to me, which I wasn't used to after getting bullied for being ugly and square and all that nice stuff. So he was lovely. But when I went to university, I wanted to play the field. As nice as he was, I really wanted to see what was out there and not just one gender either, because I couldn't like get married and settle down with the boyfriend that I met at 17. I had to really discover who I was and what I was into. So I had a lot of relationships at uni. I got a list somewhere. When I met Si, I tried to kind of give him a potted history of my love life, just so that he would know. And
Really?
we actually made a list. Some of them I can't remember their names, which is awful. But
Not
there
really.
was this one who he was a mature student. He was called Graham. He rode a motorbike. It was a Kawasaki 750 Turbo. He was always revving it up. He used to walk around campus with his long blonde curly hair, and he actually looked a bit like the singer from Def Leppard because he had a fringe as well. In hindsight now, he was ADHD as fuck. I'm absolutely sure of it. But just he had a little something about him that I really want. I just fancied the pants off him, but he wasn't a very nice boyfriend. So I pursued him relentlessly until he eventually agreed to go out with me. But then, like I said before, it's that thing where it's push-pull. He wasn't that into me. I hadn't read the book. I didn't know about this stuff. He was negging me all the time. He told me that my eye contact was either too much or not enough, that my walking gait was a bit awkward, that I swung my arms too much, all this really helpful stuff. So I never knew I had a problem with eye contact until he pointed it out. So I was never self-conscious about that until then. He goes on about that I've got really narrow interests. He couldn't believe I wasn't interested in politics or in the World Cup and stuff like that. But I wasn't interested in the things he was really focused on. But no, it just made me feel like a substandard individual, really, which made me try all the more to be all the things he wanted me to be. So much so that by the time I finally gave up on him 4.5 years later, I barely knew who I was, barely had any sense of my own identity at all. So yeah, here's a picture. So he was called Golden Graham, but this is a picture of Chris Hemsworth because I thought you might rather look at Chris Hemsworth than Golden Graham. I know I would. So just my little joke. It's a young Chris Hemsworth without a beard because one of my sensory icks is facial hair. So it's a big no-no for me to have a partner with a beard or a moustache.
No, I can't do it either.
He didn't look like that anyway. He looked like Joe Elliott. And he told me I was nothing special. Okay, so this is a picture of me when I was 20, when I was going out with him. A lot of people thought I was something special. I did modelling. I had a trail of people that were interested in me. And I didn't have any eyes for anyone but Graham. So the one person who didn't make me feel good about myself, who constantly put me down, was the one that I chased after for 4.5 years. Please don't do this. Younger me's, don't do that. Find someone that is as into you as you are into them.
But Charlie, it's really hard though, because I remember my dad sitting me down and warning me off at least 2 or 3 of my boyfriends, and he could see it. And he was like, you, and I suppose I was very defiant. I was I had an exhausting relationship with my mum and dad at that age because I was very much, I mean, now I get on with them brilliantly. Now we understand each other and I don't live with them, but I always felt that I needed control. I needed to control everything. I needed to control my life. And I think my oldest is a little bit like this now. Like, he's very defiant. If you tell him something, now I've obviously I've done all my courses and things like that, and I know how to now talk to Harry without pushing that defiant button on him. Sometimes, not, it doesn't always work. I was very much like that, and if my dad told me that I couldn't be with somebody, it would make me want to be with them more.
Yeah.
And it pushed me. And I think telling people that they can't do something sometimes is the worst thing that you can do.
Absolutely. And I thought I could change him. This is crazy. So he had a bunch of characteristics that were sexy to me. Yeah, he was wild. He introduced himself with the nickname Animal, asked him how he got it, and he started telling me about how mental he was and how he rode his motorbike around at 100 miles an hour, and he got stopped by the police, and the magistrate asked him to explain himself, and he said, I was just going out for a burn. You hook eventually somebody that's really wild like that and then try and domesticate them. Yeah. And that's ridiculous. Yeah. So my boyfriend after that, Martin, who I married, actually, my first husband, he wasn't anything like that. Okay, he might not have been my love's young dream. My parents noticed that when I was with him, I could be more myself. So I started to relax a bit and be a bit more me. I stopped trying to be all things to everyone, and I started to learn who I am. So I married him because I was happier. But then I met Sai and I fell properly in love. And for the first time ever, it was mutual. So that's my romantic story for Valentine's Day, except I was already married and I was 6 months pregnant. So, yeah.
We all like Si, apart from when he takes the mickey out of my accent.
Yeah.
He doesn't like my Essex accent.
Oh no, he does like it. Yeah, no, he's. I mean, have you heard Sai's speaking accent?
No.
Because he was born in Poole, but he was brought up in Watford, so he's kind of a bit. He sounds a bit Cockney, and he says things like "walt." So his accent is more similar to yours than it is to mine.
Got ya.
Yeah.
Got ya.
But he also tries to be a bit posh as well at times, so it's a bit all over the place like mine is.
Well, I think we all have a telephone voice, right?
Yeah.
So going back to, obviously you talk about Golden Graham quite a bit, and I think for one of the things I know through speaking to other people that are neurodivergent, I think we've all somewhere have had a toxic relationship with somebody, and I know that Golden Graham was your toxic relationship, right?
Yeah,
but
it's not the only bad experience.
No,
but it's the one I talk about the most because it went on for 4.5 years.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But then I'm not always as open, and I think I need to be. And I've spoken to my husband about it, and he knows all about Lee. That I lived in Cyprus for a little bit, and you know what? We're looking back and reflect on it now. Even back then, when he asked me out, there was something not right because he'd asked me out, and then you would go off, and then there was another guy called Wayne that was chasing after me as well. And what I know about Wayne now, I was like, oh my God, he's such a gorgeous human being. He's got such a big heart. He's lovely. But I become obsessed with the one that was ignoring me.
So I think we can get locked into a course of action. It's almost like OCD.
Yeah.
And when I was trying to make sense of it, when I was depressed after a couple of miscarriages in 2007, I hit a bit of a rock bottom. And so I started looking into my life and reading self-help books and mind mapping, and I went to psychotherapy, and I became convinced that all of my issues were due to being an adult child of an alcoholic. And that thing about being locked into a course of action, and also not expecting very much from people, and not expecting people to come through on their promises and stuff like that. It's all in this book. So I thought I knew everything then. But obviously I had a marriage breakup after that, and started a new relationship with Sai. And I now realise that a lot of it is to do with neurodivergence, both in ourselves and in them. And there's a lot of trauma and trauma responses. There's a lot of generational trauma as well. There's a whole lot more to unpick than I thought there was when I thought I knew everything when I was in my 30s. So the older I get, the more I realise that we're just scratching the surface of what we even know about ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And a bit controversial. I've said to people before that Lee was probably the worst thing, but the best thing that happened to me. And they were like, "What do you mean?" Because he not only was physically abusive, he was a compulsive gambler, and he was an ex-soldier. I met him when he was a soldier in Cyprus, and then we moved to Blackpool, where him and his family are from. And even then, the games that he used to play with me of, you're not good enough, you shouldn't be with this family. And I remember one time really sticks out to me is when I hadn't moved to Blackpool yet. I'd gone down there for Christmas. It was the first time in meeting his family. And his family are very much, if somebody starts on you, we all stick together as a family. Now, I've always been brought up is that you don't, you come away from them situations. You don't get involved into fighting. You don't brawl in a pub, that kind of way. So I've always not had that kind of atmosphere around me. And we was in this pub in Brighton, and somebody started on his dad, and the whole family just got up and started rucking. And I remember just pulling back, and then as we were walking back, he was having a go at me, saying, you obviously don't love me because you didn't get involved. And in that instant I was like, I can't do right for doing wrong. I've been told that I shouldn't do that because I've been told by family I shouldn't do that. And he's telling me I should be doing that. I don't love him because I haven't. I'm not that person. I have never been a violent, aggressive person. It's not in my nature. I'm just not that person.
Yeah.
And I should have clicked then that it wasn't going to work, but it took me 2.5 years of living with him in Blackpool to realise. And the one time that stands out, that actually it was quite a bad physical abuse at one point, and he just hit the nail on the head. And I rang my dad and said, "You was right. You need to come and get me."
Yeah.
And I had to actually physically give him £300 to go down to the bookies because I knew that I'd get him out of the house so I could get out and away without him stopping me. And
Wow.
even then, he used to phone me and tell me to come back because he loved me. And I was like, no, you don't. You really don't. And I came back to Essex. But I always say to people, actually, it was one of the best things that happened to me because it will never happen again.
Yeah.
Because
the only time
now.
I ever left Graham is when I finally did. I never went back, but he was always finishing with me and then crawling back, apologising, saying it would be different. And I just kept going back for more. It's so weird. But I had such fragile self-esteem, and I still couldn't tell you now whether he was deliberately making me feel insecure and small and deliberately chipping away at my self-esteem, or if he was just really blunt and just said things that were really thoughtless and insensitive. Still couldn't tell you. I like to think that people are generally never inherently bad people that want to destroy others. I don't think he was a psychopath because he was really nice to other people that were not going out with him, but just me, he just brought me right down. And it takes a long time to recover, I think. People have said, I've read this a few times, that it takes you the same amount of time you're in a relationship to recover from it. And that kind of rings true. So the whole time I was in my first marriage, he was still looming large over my shoulder, telling me I can't do better, that I need to settle. And but now I'm in a much more balanced relationship, and I'm just really glad that I got there because I could have so easily not done.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because when I came back, because I came back from Blackpool twice and I went back again because I was a fool. And all my friends said to me, "You've come back a different person. You're not the person who went to Cyprus. You've come back completely different. You're not that outgoing, I can do anything person. You just seem to want to stay within yourself." And I think it affected a lot of relationships after him. I didn't trust anybody. I couldn't give myself to people, and I become very frigid, very, very frigid, that I just didn't want to be with anybody. And like, again, I met the love of my life later on in life. I met Dave when I was 30, had 2 beautiful children with him. And everything worked out. I do think it's hard to say that I'm glad it happened because it shouldn't have happened, but would my pattern have changed if it hadn't?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah, there's so many sliding doors moments, and with me, so I'd let Graham crawl back again and again, and even when because I flunked university, but he carried on and finished. But then we split up, and I moved back in with my mum, and when we got back together, he was going to get a job at Myra, which was just up the road, because my mum's in Nuneaton and Myra is somewhere that he could have worked, that he was offered a job. So I thought we'd end up moving in together, but then he accepted a place on the graduate training programme at Rolls-Royce in Derby. So I spent years just going up and down the motorway to see him at weekends on my 100cc motorbike, which is illegal, I think. And I was earning £100 a week or something, and he was on about 16 grand, but I was paying for all our food. And I got into a lot of debt as well to try and buy clothes and shoes that he'd like and stuff like that, getting credit on store cards so that I could afford to see him and to bring some groceries on the way. And what he gave me back, nothing apart from social anxiety and cripplingly low self-esteem.
It comes back to that obsession again, doesn't it? We're either all or nothing. It's either, I'm obsessive. Like, if I look at some of my friends' relationships, they take it slow. Oh, I've met this guy, I might go out with him. Oh, I'm not too bothered. I'll see him again. Where I was very much like, he's not texted me. Why hasn't he rung me? Why hasn't he done this? He doesn't like me. And it was constant all the time. And my friends were like, what is the matter with you? And I'm like, well, I can see he's read it, but he hasn't answered it. Why has he not answered it? And then I reflect to myself is that actually sometimes people text me and I don't answer it. And it's not because I don't want to, I'm ignoring you. It's because I'm focused on something else.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it was that they can't do that. They need to be answering straight away. And I think sometimes I've pushed good people away from being that obsessive in the past as well.
Yeah, me too. So it's not always been a bed of roses with me and Si, because when we met, neither of us knew about ADHD at all. The only frame of reference I had for autism is my brother, who's very different from Si. We found out Si's kid was autistic, but then again, he was nothing like us either, and far more identifiable autistic traits, I think, far more stereotypical behaviours. So he and I didn't identify like that. We had a passionate relationship, which was very volatile. And if one of us got depressed, the other would think they would take it personally.
Yeah.
And
Rejection.
get very defensive, yeah. And if one of us had a meltdown, then the other would. So we were constantly triggering each other. So it was really difficult. But even then, even through the hardest, roughest times, I was so head over heels in love, and I always had faith that we would sort it out. And do you know what? I was right, because we found out I was autistic. We found out he's got ADHD. We learned about rejection sensitivity dysphoria. We learned about trauma responses. So if he was a bit cross with me or something and raised his voice a bit, I would be disproportionately upset and traumatized because of things that I'd been through in the past.
Yeah, triggers.
I'd be trying to win arguments with him and like keeping on at him, trying to get him to apologize, whereas he would have a shutdown and become completely non-responsive. So what's changed now that we know about our neurotypes, is we can nip it in the bud quicker. We know what's rational and what isn't.
Yeah.
We know that you can't resolve an argument if you're both dysregulated. We know what we each individually need to do to re-regulate ourselves. So to him, it might be going for a drive or listening to loud music. For me, it might be going for a run or a walk, or like playing some silly little game on my tablet, which just occupies my hands and empties my mind. And then we'll talk about it over a walk, like maybe 1 or 2 days later when everything's cooled down. We'll do a bit of a post-match analysis, do a bit of a row post-mortem, work out where we went wrong, what we've learned from it, and do better. And we're just going from strength to strength.
Yeah, no, we're the same, because Dave's ADHD as well. And like his response initially, if I point out something to him that he's done, which he knows he's done, right? He knows I'm right. His response is to not respond.
Yeah.
Right. He gets really defensive and he walks off. And that annoys me. I'm like, no, I've put this up.
Come back here. I haven't finished making my point. You haven't admitted you're in the wrong yet.
Yeah. But then I know that that's his response. So now that I know that, and we've talked about our responses and our reactions to certain things, and it is a lot better, because he will come back now that when I don't react, he'll come back 2 hours later and go, I'm sorry, you're right. I reflected on it. I reacted when you said it. And I reflected on it, and you're right. And vice versa. If I've done something, I always think I'm right, Charlie. I'm always right. I'm the trousers of the house, right? But I will react, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes if it's really upset me, I go introverted, completely introverted, and I'll sit on it, and then sometimes I will just explode. Like, and it all comes out at once. But he knows that of me as well. But obviously, you know that I've got PMDD, and that can be even more heightened. So if it's that week before or the 2 weeks before my period, and I'm being affected by PMDD, that I now warn him. I'm like, this is where I am in my cycle, and whatever you do, I don't mean it, and I'm going to react to something really stupid. And it's not that I mean to. But to be fair, since I've been on the tablets, it's really, really helped. But prior to that, and it was hurting our relationship, because in those weeks, I was completely reacting to really stupid things that I shouldn't be reacting to, or arguing with him over driving or something really silly. And then feel really guilty about it afterwards because I couldn't control it. So actually understanding that, I think the best thing people can do, giving a little bit of love relationship now, is talk about it. Is talk about your reactions, talk about why you react, or
when
how
you
you
calm,
prevent it.
though. Yeah.
Yeah,
So you can't
not
have
when
a
you're angry.
rational conversation if you're in meltdown. It's not possible. And a dysregulated person cannot regulate another dysregulated person, I've learned as well.
No, and there is no talking to me when I'm in that PMDD
Yeah.
like state. There just isn't. So I'm grateful that the tablets are working now, because even David said, "Wow, like the last month, you've not reacted to anything." I'm like, "I know, it's great. I need to stay on them."
Brilliant, yeah. When a man is in the wrong, and then you react and give him a bit of a bollocking, and he says either, yeah,
Are you on your period?
yeah, or did you forget your meds? Yeah, but I think that
Oh,
could
that's
definitely
not a
be
good
a
one.
defence, like in a law of court. I think that could be murder with diminished responsibility. I think when they pull stunts like that,
I
yeah.
reckon.
But we love them,
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. Well, it's been
Yeah.
emotional.